Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We are going to go ahead and get started. And I am going to record our session today. We are live on YouTube, as well as we will record today's session. So everyone will receive a copy of the recording, just FYI, and that will happen either immediately after the webinar or at least within the first 24 hours. So thank you all for being here today. Greatly appreciate your time. I'm Hallie Crawford, certified career coach, speaker, and author. And we have been coaching and training. My team of coaches and I have been coaching and training for over 22 years now. We're going to be talking today about how to negotiate a new work-life balance, given there's been so much going on and so many changes in the workplace due to COVID, etc. So thank you so much for your time being here. Let's go ahead and get started. So we've been coaching and training for over 22 years now, and we absolutely love helping our clients find the right career path, find their dream job, a job that they want to jump out of bed in the morning to go to work, and also be successful in that job in the long run. And part of being successful, understandably, is having a good sense of work-life balance in a way that is meaningful for you. And the advice that we're going to give you all today is advice that we actually give directly to our coaching clients as well. So we'll give you kind of a sneak peek of some of the advice that we provide to our clients related to this specific topic. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Let's take a look at our agenda. And these are the 5 things we're going to be discussing in the next 20 minutes or so. We'll be ending at that half hour. And as a reminder, you'll get a recording of this when we're finished today. So the 5 tips that we have for creating better life balance in this crazy world of COVID, post-COVID, so to speak. We're going to talk about external definitions and how they can cause problems for us as it relates to our sense of ourselves and our life balance as a result of that. We'll show you our life balance wheel that we use with our clients and how to leverage that effectively. Talk about fulfillment and why that's a really important piece to creating life balance for you. Setting meaningful goals, not just goals that are realistic and practical and tangible and all of that. And then finally, talk about boundaries and those boundaries that we want to start putting in place for ourselves in order to manage our time effectively so we have that greater sense of balance. Okay. So let's talk first about this impact of COVID. We've all experienced, I think, in different ways, longer working hours because we've been working remotely for so long. Some of you may have gone back to in-person work, maybe still fully remote, a hybrid model, et cetera. But as we all know, we don't want to be like this woman on the screen, and we just don't want to be working so much that it's having an impact on our mental or physical health. Okay, we've got to be careful about that. And given everything that's happened due to COVID, there are a few statistics here on this slide and a couple of things we want you to think about too. So what has been discovered, so to speak, or, when people were surveyed during COVID, homebound employees, people that are working remotely, tend to log about 3 hours more of work per day on the job, which is not a good thing, obviously. Some of you may have experienced also this sense of blurred passage of time. This is something that I've experienced personally, and that our clients have told us a lot too, that it's almost like because we don't have those breaks that we normally have for a meeting in the conference room down the hall at our office or the commute to work, that time starts to kind of get blurred a little bit. We're just running from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. And then all of a sudden it's the end of the day. And have we done anything to take care of ourselves? Probably not. A lot of people, as we've all heard, the Great Recession, is that a lot of people are thinking about quitting or a new career path. And a lot of the reasons for that are because they're either burned out from working too much. Some people are saying, like, I really want to go back to the office because that was my social life, for example, and they discovered maybe that their coworkers were one of the best things about their jobs. We've had clients tell us that, but we've also had clients tell us the opposite extreme, where They're saying, how do I tell my boss that I never want to see her again in person? Haha, I want to work remotely. So how we view our jobs due to COVID or as a result of all of these changes in the workplace and how we view balance in our lives has changed enormously. And so it's a really good time right now to evaluate what balance looks like for you, because we feel like our clients are talking a lot more about this than they ever have before. And the other good news is that employers are listening more than they ever have before. It's an employee's market, as most of you probably know. And employers are doing a lot more to try to help their employees with life balance, with, mental struggles, et cetera, et cetera. We have one client who has a stipend for professional development, but they also let him use that money for personal things as well. And he's actually taking scuba diving classes. So employers are listening more than ever, and it's a good time, more so than ever, I think, to start to ask for some of the things that you would like. You can get away with this, so to speak. That's not a great way to put it, but employers are going to listen more than they ever have. Okay. So a couple of things from this slide before we go to the next one that we want you to keep in mind is that when you're thinking about balance in your life, personal, professional, everything else that you have going on, balance is fluid. It's not something that you achieve and then you check the box and you're done. It's very much, it's going to change all the time based on life decisions that you make, internal and external things that might happen to you. So you want to think of it as an organic process and something that's going to change over time. And you don't want to put this perfectionism on it either to say, okay, if I can get everything perfect, then I'll be in balance and it's all good. It's something you need to be working on a pretty regular basis. It's also really important to think about life balance as how you define it versus any external definitions. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But it's really important to think about, what does balance look like for you versus what does it look like for your friends or your coworkers, et cetera. It's not helpful to compare yourself to other people in that regard, because everyone defines balance in their lives very differently. So that's what we're here to do today, is to talk about how you define it for yourself. Now, if you look at the bottom left here, one of the ways we can begin to define or consider what balance looks like for us is to think about what our values are, personal and professional values, because our values can serve as like an internal compass, if you will, to help us define what balance means for us. Now, we all know what a compass is. It's used for, orientation and direction, obviously. And what happens to us, understandably, because we're human, that problems come into play or issues when there's interference in that direction, or we deviate from what's really important to us balance-wise and otherwise. Sometimes these deviations can be intentional, like we decide to get a new puppy, to have a child, to get married. Sometimes those deviations, though, can be unintentional. We lose our job, something happens to a family member, etc. And it's really important to look inside first for what balance means for you versus comparing yourself to others. And this is why we're going to talk about values today. And I'll use me as just a quick example here. I, as a business owner, I obviously have control over my own schedule for the most part. And I actually work most weekends, but I'm okay with that. Balance for me looks like being able to take some time off during the course of my work week to be able to pick up my son, do something for him, spend time with him, etc. So I'm completely okay, actually, with working a little bit on the weekends. I have a different mindset and am sometimes that much more creative when I work on the weekends. And it's not a ton, and it gives me the sense of balance in other parts of my life. And some people might say, that sounds terrible, that's a bad idea, but that's what works for me. And I do the same thing on vacation. I have found that if I stay on top of things at least a little bit when I'm on vacation, I am much better like as a person and more productive when I come back as a result of doing that. So it's how you define it. So let's look at our first step. One of the first things we want you to do when you're considering what balance means for you and how to get in greater balance is you want to identify what external definitions you may have running your life that may or may not be working for you. So one of the first things, if you look at the middle of the slide here, is as humans, professionals, etc., we tend to get caught up in our daily lives, which is normal. And we begin to, in some ways, start to define ourselves externally a little bit more than maybe we should. It could be based on our roles, on our profession, how much money we're making, what our strengths are, etc. And you just want to be careful about how you're defining yourself as a professional, as a mother, as a partner, etc. And make sure that those definitions are ones that are true to you and are working for you. We all are going to have inherited values or norms or definitions or priorities from society or from our family of origin. That's just a normal part of being a person. But we want to think about what those external definitions and kind of rules are that we may be living by that may not be working for us as much. I gave you an example of me like this. Most people will say never work on vacation. That's a really bad idea. But for me, over time, I've defined what balance looks like for me. And I do work a little bit on vacation. It actually makes me feel better in a lot of ways. So it needs to be about you, not any external definitions. So the ideal here, obviously, is to remove any of those external definitions that we don't want or no longer work for us, okay? And try to set our schedule and actions as much as possible. I realize that when you have a boss working for an organization, you don't have full control over this. But as much as possible, try to make small changes or tweaks in your schedule, your intentions, how you approach projects and tasks. And what we want to tell you too is that what we found with our clients is that the good news too is that when you make really small changes, you can get really big results. You don't have to take huge dramatic action steps necessarily to get your life in greater balance. Small little steps can actually make a really huge difference, okay? So our ideal here with step number 1 is to discard those external definitions that are not working for us and have our sense of ourselves come from the inside out versus the outside in. Because as we all know, especially COVID as an example, our external circumstances can change. So the goal is, if I leave you with this first step with an image, the goal is to be more like this Mobius strip, if you will, where your internal life is flowing and there's harmony between your internal world, who you are as a person, what's important to you, and your external world as much as possible. Here are 4 action steps that you can try to take or consider. I would say pick one as a starting point, whatever resonates for you, that can help you start to create that internal and external harmony as it relates to balance. Do a quick self-assessment, identify what external definitions are running the show a little bit too much, and start to work on removing those and discarding them. We can help you with that through coaching. Feel free to contact us about that. You can interview other people to talk with them a little bit more about how they view you. How do they view that you're living your life, so to speak, and what values come to their mind and adjectives when they think of you. If you feel like you're living by external definitions too much, write a new story. What's the new story? What do you want your work day and your work week and personal life to look like based on what you've learned about yourself and what's really important to you during COVID? And finally, start to think about what's fulfilling to you. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few moments. Write down what really fills you and what you're passionate about, what you've gotten excited about in the past, whether it's personal hobbies or work stuff. And do you honor those things? Are you taking action on a regular basis to do things that fill you up as a person and as a professional as well? Let's talk about step number 2 and our life balance wheel that we use with clients. The life balance wheel, there's basically 4 ways to leverage this effectively, and I'll show it to you on the next slide here again. We would like you to go through these 4 steps now, but it's a really good idea to assess your life balance at least quarterly on a regular basis. We want our clients to incorporate their life balance goals and needs into their strategic career plan. That should be part of what you're doing, whether you share that part with your boss or not. It should be something that you want to think about because it will help you be effective and successful in the long run. There are 4 ways to leverage the life balance wheel. Number 1, you can adjust the categories. These are the categories that we have listed on this slide that we use with clients. As a quick reminder, everyone, you will receive a copy of the recording of this so you can watch it later on. These are the categories we like best, but you may want to change them or rename them based on your situation. The second thing we want you to do is to rate your current state. Where are you on the life balance wheel in each of these areas? Here's another example or image of the same life balance wheel. So you rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 7. I know this is a little bit fuzzy, but I wanted to show it here because after you rank yourself with your current state, it's a good idea to draw lines between your the different categories and the numbers you've given them. And the image here is to imagine that if this was a wheel on your car, you know, it wouldn't roll very well. So we want to get those categories higher up on the scale. The third thing that you can do after you do current state is to begin to define your future state and journal about it. Even create a vision board. We have clients do that as well, and they love that. So how would each area look if they were at a 7 for you? And then finally, we already mentioned this, but reassess or assess your life balance on a quarterly basis, because we all know that things can get away from us. And all of a sudden we realize that things have been out of balance for 6 months plus. It's a really good idea to stay on top of it. It's easier to stay on top of balance versus kind of dragging it back to the beginning and starting all over again. So as much as you possibly can, we want you to pay attention to it on a regular basis. Let's talk about step number 3 next, and this is defining fulfillment. This goes back a little bit more to, defining what balance means for us as a person. And one of the ways, not just thinking about time management and where you spend your time, but how you spend your time. And if you're doing things that are fulfilling to you, can make a huge difference on if you feel like you have a sense of life balance. Okay. And the reason why there is a mermaid from Weeki Wachee on the screen is as a kid, I grew up in Florida and we went to Weeki Wachee all the time. And when a childhood dream of mine was to be a mermaid at Weeki Wachee. That's what I thought my career would be. And although that wasn't the most practical thing for me to pursue, and obviously I didn't, when I thought about that career path or that childhood dream, and even when I think about my hobbies, my interests, and the times in my career and in my personal life when I have felt lit up, there were possible values that were reflected in that childhood dream of being a mermaid. I love entertaining people, but also educating them at the same time through creating PowerPoint presentations and doing webinars like this. And that's how I saw being a mermaid. There's an element I felt like as a kid of risk in that. And one of my values is actually risk. So even if being a mermaid or one of these other passions or interests that you have is not the most practical career path, it's a clue to, or those things can be clues to possible values that you have. And as a result, elements that you may want to try to incorporate either into your personal life or into your career path a little bit more in order to be fulfilled, okay? When we perform actions in alignment with our values and with fulfillment on a regular basis in our lives, professionally and personally, even if our life schedule-wise is a little bit more out of balance, we are going to feel more in balance because we're living more according to our values, if that makes sense. Okay. Because we get energy from living by our values and that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. Now, there's 2 other ways that you can start to define what fulfillment means for you. Another one is to define success. If you look on this slide here, write about just for a few minutes, what does success mean to you at this phase in your life and in your career post-COVID? It could have changed since the beginning of COVID. And so it's a really good idea to kind of check that out and think about it. And don't think about this too hard. Like, what does success mean to you? And just kind of blurt it out on paper, because you can start to identify the adjectives and themes that come to mind and notice if it's changed at all over the past couple of years. And another thing that we do with our clients actually all the time to help them identify 3 to 5 personal and career values is to leverage what we call a peak experience. A peak experience exercise is to think about a moment in time or a period of time in your life. Personally, first. We like people to think of a personal experience first. And think about what was cool about that experience for you. A little bit less about the details of it, like who you were with, et cetera, but what was neat about that experience. And that can give you some clues to some of your possible values. What you'll notice if you talk with a friend or family member or a coach like us about it, which we highly recommend because it helps to share it with someone else, because they can mirror back some things that you may not have noticed or seen. But you want to think, for example, give you a quick example. two people have the same peak experience, like a trip to Europe a long time ago, one person may be talking a little bit more about the planning of the trip, the logistics, where they were going to stay, how much time between each city, et cetera, et cetera. That person has a different set of values than the person describing the same trip. But what was cool about it for them was the experience of being there, the relationships that they developed or enhanced while being there, the beauty or the creativity of the art, the food, et cetera. Same peak experience, but two different sets of values. So defining fulfillment can help you a lot. And very specifically, when you start to think about what your values are, those are your guideposts to fulfillment. So if you could even, for example, have a list of your values always on your desk, on your monitor, or whatever it is, to remind you of what they are, that will help you get your life in greater balance, because it will remind you to take action steps in alignment with those values as much as you feasibly can. Organize your day in alignment with those values, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. As part of step number 3 in defining fulfillment, the reason why we talk about fulfillment as such a critical piece, especially professionally, is because fulfillment affects every other piece of the career model that we use with our coaching clients. It impacts like if we're not leveraging our strengths on a regular basis, we are not going to be fulfilled. If we're not in the right work environment, we're not going to be fulfilled. All of these other pieces integrate with or impact our fulfillment at work. And what we have found is if you start with this career model in terms of thinking about, okay, where is my career life in balance, and rank each of these pieces of our model on a scale of 1 to 10, where your career is now in each area, this can help you get in greater balance in your professional life as one place to start as well. You want to look at, is my career fulfilling for me? Am I enjoying the tasks and projects that I'm working on? Am I leveraging my strengths on a regular basis? Am I leveraging my past education and experience in a way that I want to? Does my work, the role I play and the people I work with and the culture of the organization or the environment, is it a fit for me and my personality type? And then finally, compensation. Am I being compensated adequately? So it's a really good idea also, in addition to using the tool of the balance wheel, to look inside of your career too, to see where things may be in balance or out of whack a little bit there, because that can help you define what needs to change inside of your career life to help you feel a little bit more in balance. Now, remember, small changes can have really, really big results. So we're not asking you to go to your boss and say, I want to work every other day, or, something like that. The way you approach your tasks can make a difference. What you're focused on at the beginning of your day versus at the end of your day, et cetera. This sounds really silly, but I'll use me as a quick example. I work remotely and have done so from home for the past 23 years. And for me, I like things to kind of be in order at home. And sometimes if I can take a quick break for 5 minutes, I like going and doing laundry, actually, or those types of things, because those align with my values. It gives me energy, helps me kind of noodle on things, gives me focus, etc. So think about it in that way, that there are small things you can do to live more according to your values, which can help you with the balance. Let's talk about step number 4 next. And this is setting meaningful as well as realistic, practical, important goals to us. And what we mean by this is when you're establishing personal and professional goals, we want you as much as possible to attach those life balance goals to your career and personal values. I just gave you my example about time during my lunch hour to clean my office, ending early, like I said earlier, and working a little bit on the weekends. So when you're establishing your goals, whether they're personal or professional, as much as you can, try to attach those to your values. They will have more meaning for you. You will therefore be more fulfilled when you achieve them, and you'll be more motivated to achieve them too. We also recommend attaching your professional goals to the ideal career model and keeping in mind that balance isn't always just about time management and boundaries. If you are working in a work environment that is energizing to you, that can help you feel like you're in greater balance. And then finally, on the bottom of the right here, we talked already about adding life balance goals to your strategic career plan as a line item, and test out different strategies for the next couple weeks. Try something small and see how it goes and adjust things. If this can be baby steps. Again, you don't have to do 10 different things all at once. Try a couple of different things and see how it goes. And if you don't have a strategic career plan, we work on this all the time with our clients. Feel free to contact us on our website or at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to talk with you about that. So we talked already about setting meaningful goals and attaching your professional goals a little bit more to our ideal career model. It's a really neat idea once you've gone through that to kind of take a next step to create a vision statement for each area of the career model, especially if any of you are feeling like you may not be in the right career fit or in the right job right now. That can help you create a picture of what the ideal job might be for you. And for those of you who feel like I can stay put, but I need to change some of the areas maybe to feel a little bit more fulfilled, you can identify a goal for each area to work on. So for example, do I need to, figure out ways that I can adjust the work environment for me a little bit more, whether it's my home office or in-person office, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Let's take a look at the last slide here for step number 4, and then we're going to move to step 5, and we will close here in about 5 minutes. So as part of setting meaningful goals, when you're developing your strategic career plan, and this is basically your long-term career plan, what you want to achieve in the next year, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years out in terms of your career, combine your balance goals into that, and also attach those goals as much as you can to your career values as well, because again, you'll be that much more motivated and excited about them. And when you achieve them, they're going to have a lot more meaning for you at the end of the day. We would recommend life balance goals of being like 1 or 2 per quarter. It doesn't have to be huge. Keep it short and sweet and simple, and things that you can achieve. But like we said earlier, you can play with options a little bit. If any of you feel like your situation is unique, you need more help with this, obviously we are here to help. We always do a free career strategy session with prospective clients to give them some advice about next steps and tell them a little bit more about coaching. We'd be happy to talk with any of you on the call today about that. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com and we'll get that set up with you. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. All right. Step number 5 is setting boundaries. And this is not the last one because it's the least important. It's usually the one that is our go-to first when we think about boundaries. We wanted to present the other ones first because that's a different way, and I think more meaningful way to consider your life balance goals. But we obviously need to think about setting personal boundaries as well as part of our time management for life balance. Setting some personal limits about when you're going to be willing to check your phone or your work email and respond to people. Identify when you are at your best during the course of your workday and work on difficult projects or ones you don't like as much during that time. That will enable you to be a little bit more efficient and more, energized. You may share some of these boundaries with your boss if they would be amenable to it, and you may not. That's okay. But we want you to think about what those personal limits need to be for yourself and to communicate the ones that would be appropriate to do so to the right people. So your coworkers know when they can reach you, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. You might want to say to yourself, for example, a personal limit about when and how often you're going to check your email and get back to people, et cetera. So again, these personal limits can be really, really important. And even just small steps here can make a big difference, as we've already said. Now, there may be some that you keep to yourself and some that you negotiate with your supervisor. If you're going to ask your supervisor for some adjustments to your schedule, et cetera, there are some advice or pieces of advice on this next slide here. A couple of things to think about is don't just go in and ask, but come in with a plan for how you're going to handle everything. Be prepared. Don't just toss it at them and then expect them to figure it all out. The second thing would be to, as part of the plan, talk to them about how this might impact the bottom line, because that's what they care about at the end of the day. What are the benefits of you having this adjusted schedule or whatever? Will you be a more productive worker? Will you be more successful in the long run for these reasons? Okay. And finally, be open to compromise. So you might want to ask for the ideal and exactly what you want, but be prepared to compromise a little bit, obviously, if needed. And think also about, if you don't get the exact perfect thing, what would be a compromise that you would be willing to accept, so to speak, and be prepared for that as well. Okay. And when you are setting your boundaries, you do want to make sure that you take some time to unplug and recharge, and do have some other, even like physical boundaries as well. Like, for example, if you're going back to the office, really make sure that you take some time for lunch, even if it's just 20 minutes. Don't always sit at your desk. Like, take a walk outside, at least 3 times a week or whatever it is. Okay. And there are kind of taglines that you can say to people too, who maybe tend to interrupt you a little bit more if you don't have time to talk with someone. We have worked in the past with our clients on things that they can say politely to people to establish those boundaries as well for meetings and talk time and conversations. Our last 2 slides for today, and then we are at time, so I will let you all go. It's a really good idea to get support with this. 2 heads are better than 1. Ask a coworker, hire a coach like us, ask a friend or family member to help you with your life balance goals and get that support. Leverage technology to help you be more efficient, and even meditation apps like Calm or time tracking apps that can help you get a sense or clear sense of where you're spending your time and if you're being productive. And finally, we'd really like you to make sure that you take away 1 action step that you write down that you will take in the next week from today. So please make sure that you do this, like set a goal for yourself, write down 1 action step that you will try out at least for the next week. It could be identifying your top 3 values. It could be reviewing the ideal career model. We would love to chat with you about coaching. Please feel free to set that up with us. You would just email us at admin@HallieCrawford on the slide here today. Thank you all so much again for your time. We greatly appreciate it. And good luck with your life balance goals. Remember, small steps can mean really, really big results. It doesn't have to be huge. Have a great day, everyone.